This podcast is for educational purposes only and does not provide medical advice or create a doctor-patient relationship. Please do not rely solely on this discussion. Always consult your own healthcare provider and verify information independently. If you're in crisis or experiencing a mental health emergency, call 911 or go to your nearest emergency department.
Sarah Black is the managing partner at Black Criminal Law, a criminal defense firm in downtown Kingston. She studied history at Dalhousie before completing her law school degree at Queen's and was called to the Ontario Bar in 2018 and opened her practice just a week later. While she works across all areas of criminal law, her passion is in advocating for marginalized individuals, especially those facing mental health and addiction challenges. Sarah is deeply involved in the Kingston community. She's a member of the Ontario Education Justice Network Committee. She serves as a secretary of the Frontenac Law Association and acts as the regional director for Kingston with the Criminal Lawyers Association, and sits on the board of directors for the Queen's University Prison Law Clinic and Martha's Table. She was named one of Kingston's 40 under 40, and to top it all off, her firm has been voted best defense firm for the last 3 years in a row. Sarah, absolute pleasure having you on today's podcast, where we're going to be asking you questions in relation to the law and mental health. Now, before we get into the legal details, what first drew you to becoming a criminal defense lawyer, and particularly working with people with mental health and addiction challenges?
So when I was going through law school, I explored a few areas of the law. And to be quite honest with you, I found a lot of them boring.
Okay.
But family law and criminal law really stood out to me. I've always kind of been somebody that roots for the underdog, and I like to advocate for people that can't necessarily advocate for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that really directed me towards criminal law. Especially because criminal law sees the highest number of individuals with addictions issues, mental health issues, homelessness, marginalized individuals that are facing the justice system without really knowing how to navigate it. And so I wanted to take on the role of assisting those people and maybe listening to them where other people may not have,
right.
And giving them a chance to tell their story, and to do that through, the mouthpiece of an advocate, somebody that knows the law, knows the players, knows the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what inspired me to get into criminal defense.
So for listeners who may not realize this, how often does mental health actually come up in criminal cases?
Oh, every day. Every day. I would say that out of I think right now we have 130 open files. I can't say that there's one that mental health isn't somehow playing a part in each one of those cases.
Now, there's a common belief that people with mental health illnesses are more dangerous, unpredictable. What does your experience as a lawyer in the courtroom actually show?
For the most part, that's not accurate. Absolutely, there are some mental health issues that can be dangerous if not managed properly. However, I say that doesn't happen in the majority of the cases. A lot of the times, number one, there's a lot of supports in the community. A lot of my clients are followed by Providence Care, the ACT team, Addiction and Mental Health Services in Kingston. They're medicated, they're in counseling, they're doing things that are ensuring the protection of public safety.
Right.
And obviously there are parts of the criminal code and there's parts of the justice system that allow for specific avenues for people with mental health issues to explore if they do come across the justice system or they are charged with a crime. Public safety is absolutely at the forefront of everybody's concern in criminal law, but I wouldn't say that somebody with mental health issues poses more of a danger to somebody in the public than anybody.
And it's a spectrum as well.
Absolutely.
When we say mental health, a person could be suffering from depression. They may have even addiction is on a spectrum of its own. A person could be addicted or have difficulties with alcohol, may or may not have gone through some rehab therapy as well. Yes, when you have individuals with untreated schizophrenia, perhaps, or untreated bipolar disorder in manic phases, there combined with potential substance abuse, that can escalate risk significantly. So,
Absolutely.
but it's on a spectrum. So I think it's important to be able to destigmatize the aspect that everybody with a mental health issue would be somewhat more dangerous than somebody else. So another myth is that people get off because of a mental health issue. Can you explain what would generally happen in certain cases?
Yeah, so it gets a little bit technical, but again, it's a spectrum. So if somebody is, let's say having a manic episode, they're bipolar, they're having a manic episode, they're detached from their body and they break a window.
Mm-hmm.
At that point in time, you're going to be looking at a not criminally responsible defense. So when somebody is not clearly in their mind and their body, they can't tell the difference between what's right and wrong at the time that the offense is committed or alleged to have been committed, then you have to look at whether the actus reus is there, usually the guilty act,
Yeah.
and then there's the guilty mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the mens rea. And if you don't have a guilty mind, then you can't be convicted of a crime.
Exactly.
So, it really depends on the spectrum. If somebody is having that kind of episode where they can't differentiate between right and wrong, then you're going to be looking at a defense of not criminally responsible by way of mental disorder. And so if that's the case, you absolutely do not get off. That person is then referred to, if the court finds that they are not criminally responsible, that person is referred to the Ontario Review Board that oversees people that have been found not criminally responsible in criminal court. Now, that is an ongoing experience. They continue to be overlooked by that board. There's risk assessments that are done on a yearly basis. That board has the ability and the authority to order that person into hospital. So in no way, shape, or form are they getting off. Even if they're found to be NCR, they are still subject to a whole regime of people overseeing their mental health and their risk to the public constantly.
So sometimes they could actually spend even more time within the system under the jurisdiction of the Ontario Review Board, and obviously each province has their own review board system. So, but sometimes they can spend more time under the jurisdiction of the review board than they would if they were to have
absolutely
pled guilty and just received a regular sentence.
Yeah, and that's the other side of it. So for somebody that's not necessarily completely detached from their mind, but their mental health played a big role in the commission of the offense, myself as a defense lawyer, I would want to ensure that I was completely educated on what exactly was happening with them, what kind of support they were getting or continued to get, and then you would be able to put that forward to the court as mitigation on a sentence. So, it's not that it was not criminally responsible because they were still understanding right from wrong, but let's say their addiction coupled with the mental health issues that they were experiencing, lessens their moral culpability.
Right.
And so they can't be held to the same standard as somebody that's functioning on just a completely neutral level.
Exactly.
And so, often, depending on the seriousness of the offense, it may make sense to, say, I'd like to argue for mental health diversion. I'd like to argue for a conditional discharge.
So what does that mean, mental health diversion?
So mental health diversion is a program that needs to be approved by the Crown. There are some offenses that won't be appropriate for mental health diversion, usually sexual assault or violent crimes. But what it is that the person agrees to take some responsibility for what happened and work with a mental health association. Usually it's Addictions and Mental Health Services that then make further referrals, and they work closely with that organization and with the referrals that are made for a specific period of time that the Crown would like to see stability. And then once that has been completed to the satisfaction of AMHS, if there's a doctor involved and the Crown, then the Crown asks the court to withdraw the charges at the end of that.
So it gives the accused the ability to seek help, get help for their addiction, which was perhaps the likely reason, if not the prominent reason for them committing those offenses, to get the help and avoid going through the criminal justice system that way.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So that's obviously always a very beneficial way of dealing with things. And I know that it's personally helped a lot of my clients because a criminal conviction is a very serious thing, and it
Mhm.
can change the entire trajectory of your life. So having, the Crown say, we're going to give you a shot to try to address the issues that led you before us, I think that's a really good opportunity for a lot of people.
From your perspective, how often are charges really a reflection of the unmet needs of mental health and addiction services rather than their actual criminal intent?
That's a
So
hard question.
it's
um, I see such a huge scope of criminality. Everything from stealing a chocolate bar to first degree murder.
right.
So it's hard for me to say, can't put a number on it, I don't
Mhm.
think. What I can say is that a lot of the lower end
Mhm.
things, mischief causing disturbances, thefts, a lot of that is homelessness,
Mhm.
a need for those things. And often what's accompanied in homelessness and a lack of access to supports is both mental health and addictions. And so when we're looking at the lower end of the spectrum, I think it's quite often that the lack of criminal intent is pretty prevalent.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, they intended to steal the chocolate bar, but like, was that a criminal intent or was it?
It's really interesting. Once upon a time, I was working in forensic psychiatry as well. And we would have patients come in basically saying that they threw a brick or a stone at a window during in December or January just so that they could get a
Get
warm place to
inside?
sleep.
Yeah.
Even though they would get arrested, charged, they would be put into a detention center just so that. So, in my mind, what I've seen over the years is the triad of homelessness, addictions, and mental health services.
Mm-hmm.
If those were better coordinated, I think that would reduce significantly. And again, we have significant homelessness population in Kingston. Yes, Queen's Department of Psychiatry, they have a division within the community psychiatry that try and help with our homeless population, but it's still an ongoing challenge as you
Yes,
described.
absolutely.
So once mental health becomes an issue in a case, how is it formally raised and addressed in the criminal justice system?
So again, I think it depends on the scope of it. When I meet with my clients and I do an intake, I obviously am asking questions about mental health. Sometimes it's forthcoming. Sometimes I have to dig a little bit deeper, and sometimes I need to explain why I want to know. It's not for judgment purposes. It's not so I can, pigeonhole you into some kind of specific, subject. I'm trying to understand, and I'm trying to understand how the criminal law can apply to somebody that's going through something to do with mental health. I do an intake, and then I use my own judgment to determine what the best route is in order to raise it with the Crown or the court, address it, get some supporting documentation. So it really depends on the spectrum again, because you know using some supporting documentation and work that people are doing to mitigate a sentence or to try to get mental health diversion, that looks very, very different than going not criminally responsible by way of mental disorder. So it's a situation where I'm doing a triage and then deciding what the best
Okay.
call is.
So mental health courts and diversion programs. I mean, Toronto has a mental health court. Do you think we need a mental health court in Kingston?
Yes.
Well, that was quick. You didn't even. There was not even a millisecond of a delay. Why?
I've actually been trying to advocate for a specific mental health court in Kingston for years now. I've been working with addictions and mental health services. I've had a few meetings with the local judiciary and the Crown's office. It's important because these cases should be dealt with differently than just the regular criminal justice stream, for a number of reasons. Not one of them is saving time and not subjecting people that are struggling with mental health to the regular court system, where it's not the best way to have people face that. It's scary and it's anxiety ridden, but the reality is that we just don't have enough resources in Kingston.
Another advantage is that if you have a mental health court, I mean, obviously, when we say mental health court, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a separate building
No.
on its own. So when we say mental health court, is perhaps dedicating maybe a day a week or half or something per week or every 2 weeks, whereby these cases are heard back to back. The advantage would be then you can have those organizations dedicate their time, whether it's addictions or mental health, forensic psychiatry, dedicate resources for that specific day of the month or of the week to be present so that it becomes, a much more effective and efficient way to, deal with cases.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, the main thing is you would need to probably have one crown that is very, educated and aware of mental health law and, sensitive enough to deal with accused that are struggling with mental health. So you would want a dedicated crown, but you would also need staff. You would have to determine if would be a justice of the peace or a judge, like what's the scope of the court. We only have 3 courtrooms in Kingston, and right now they're backed up to no avail. We have bail court every day. We have 2 judges courts where we have trials and pleas. I mean, the reality is Kingston needs another courthouse. Kingston needs something like Belleville, where you've got this big new building. You have enough court staff. You have enough courtrooms. And when you have something like that, you're able to facilitate those specialized courts. We could very much use an Indigenous person's court, as well as mental health, as well as addictions, like drug treatment court.
Right.
That's huge.
Even space to be able to have meetings, just to discuss.
Absolutely.
Because I've been to our Kingston court. Yes, you have the chambers, but beyond that,
yeah, it's not good. And we have been also lobbying for that as part of the Frontenac Law Association. We've been speaking with the Attorney General. Our MP has been great, but nothing's happening. Something needs to happen.
Something needs to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So from a defense lawyer's perspective, what makes collaboration with clinicians work well and what does not?
It's always really great to have somebody that you can call up, obviously with your client's permission, say, listen, this is the case that I have. This is what I'm thinking about. What do you think? Would you meet with my client? Could you give me like a brief overview of what if you think this meets the threshold for NCR? If not, are there any referrals that can be made? I mean, when you have a clinician that you can work well with, that makes a world of difference to yourself, to the clients. And if you have somebody that is, reputable, to the court as well, because now I've got, a report from that clinician saying what I'm arguing for has a basis. And so I think that it's extremely important to have a clinician that you trust, that you can refer clients to, that your clients can trust, in order to just help things move more smoothly when you're dealing with mental health in the criminal justice system.
So how do you advocate for a client who might be quite unwell, ambivalent about treatment, lacks insight, but you're still at the same time trying to respect their autonomy?
That's difficult. But at the end of the day, they are their own person and they need to make their own decisions. And so you can absolutely lay out as sensitively as possible the potential outcomes and the potential avenues. And then you have to leave it up to them. The only time that it gets to a point where, fitness is at issue, fitness to stand trial, fitness for myself to take instructions, that's the only time that I think that I would have to look for judicial intervention. But
meaning that the court will basically order that the individual is sent to a hospital to assess whether they are able to provide instructions and understand the court process and what happens in court.
Exactly.
Right.
That's a very high threshold.
It is, yeah.
So for the most part, my job is to make sure that people understand the law as it applies to them, understand their options, understand the consequences. And unless they reach that threshold where I don't think that they understand the players or they don't understand what's happening, or I can't get instructions from them, then it's up to them. And just because they're not making the right decision, it doesn't mean that it's not the decision that they're making from an informed point of view. So I think that autonomy is extremely important.
What would you wish mental health professionals better understand about the legal pressures and constraints of a defense lawyer?
I've worked with a few doctors that have said my client wasn't fit without realizing really what the fitness test was. Because, obviously they're not well. I understand that. But, and I had a doctor say, I don't think that this person can instruct their counsel. Well, that's not a call for you to make. That's a call for me to make. And he actually can instruct me because based on the test and the case law, I can get instructions from this client. I'm not saying he's making the right decision, but he's making an informed decision. And I don't think that based on the legal test, it meets that threshold. So perhaps that test might be something that I'm not saying you, it wasn't you.
You work closely with marginalized individuals. What does meaningful access to justice look like when someone has a mental health issue?
So, as we said earlier, mental health issues, not always, but are often tied to addictions and homelessness as well. I'll start there. So, first of all, when somebody is homeless and they're struggling with their mental health, keeping track of times that they have to be in court is not always at the forefront of their mind. Sometimes it's, where am I going to get my next meal?
Yeah.
Am I going to be warm tonight when I have, will I have somewhere to sleep? And so I think that there needs to be a little bit more of an understanding of that. When people are, asked to Zoom in, they're arrested and they're released, and it's like, here's a piece of paper with a Zoom link on it. Like, that's not helpful for a lot of the population. So now we have the courthouse open in person again, which is great.
Right.
We have addictions and mental health workers at the courthouse.
Yeah.
We have duty counsel there. They have mental health training. So it's gotten a lot better. Like during COVID, I think it was really difficult. But we discussed that, we worked towards that. And now that's something that's definitely providing more access to justice, because you can be there in person. There's a little bit more patience for understanding that if somebody misses a probation appointment maybe once and they have a genuine excuse for why that happened, that it's not just like straight to jail. Like, it's like, okay, let's take a step back and think about what factors this person has in their life that maybe contributed to them missing an appointment. So I think that that's also something that's become a lot better.
Almost sounds like a multidisciplinary team.
Yes.
To an extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, the law, justice, and showing that justice is being served, but it's also for what's best for the public, ultimately.
Yes.
And what's also best for the rehabilitation of these individuals, so that they don't reoffend.
Yes.
And don't get back into the criminal justice system. So for families listening who may have a loved one caught in this criminal justice system, what would you want them to know or to do early on?
I think that obviously everything has to come through the person that is being accused, right? You can't bypass that aspect of it. So families can always advocate for their loved ones, gather documentation, gather information, and present that to the lawyer. But at the end of the day, it's going to have to be the accused person that is directing the lawyer as to what defenses to bring, what information to share. But it's always great when a lawyer has that information, because then the lawyer can best advocate for the person and best explain to them what their options are. So I'd say, try to communicate with the person that's accused, just support them, make sure that they know that you're there for them. Try not to overstep them and just go straight to their lawyer. Like, I think that doesn't always help the situation. But making sure that information is being shared is always important. And yeah, supporting that person and making sure that they're not feeling isolated is huge. Yeah, exactly. Because that's what family and supports need to be. And that's what I try to be as somebody's lawyer, is obviously their advocate, but also I'm trying to make sure that they're okay through such a scary time in their life.
So if you could change one thing at the intersection of law and mental health in Ontario, what would that be and why?
I honestly think that it would be to have another stream for people that are significantly impacted by mental health, and that impact caused or was a contributing factor to the offending behavior. So as we discussed before, a specific mental health court with a dedicated crown, perhaps a dedicated judge, AMHS workers, they are support workers that are there that can make referrals. That would be huge.
So do we have enough cases to support one?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah.
So despite the challenges, what gives you hope when working at the intersection of criminal law, mental health, and community advocacy?
The majority of my clients end up with great results because of the support that they had throughout the process. That is support from agencies like AMHS, supports from doctors like yourself, support from the Crown's office who decides to say, okay, we're going to give this person a shot, or we're going to take into account what they're going through, and then support from the judiciary and the mental health system. As you said, there are different aspects to mental health, and it's on a spectrum. But I definitely think that the judges listen, and rehabilitation is at the forefront of a lot of sentencing principles. There are specific cases, denunciation and deterrence is what's at the forefront of sentencing. But in a lot of other cases, rehabilitation and just ensuring that there's still public safety concerns that are being addressed in whatever sentence is crafted, that's a huge thing.
Exactly.
And so what gives me hope is seeing people show up at my office, a week or two after being arrested, completely overwhelmed, upset, like, this is the worst time of my life. I'm never going to get through this. Fast forward 6 months to a year later, and they're supported. They're dealing with their charges in a way that makes sense. They have a new lease on life. They have supports, even if it's through probation, access to rehabilitation,
right,
to ensure that these things aren't going to happen again. Now, obviously, that's not all of my clients, but a large majority of them do end up that way. And that's what gives me hope to keep doing what I'm doing.
Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you
very
me.
much for your time. We had a great time talking with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.